Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast where we try and improve our play through a more analytical approach. I'm joined this week, finally, in fact, because it's the first pod we've done together since last season, by Luke. How are you doing, mate? You okay?
I'm good, mate. I've been enjoying the break, watching from afar, watching all your creative work with our fellow guests, and just relaxing. So yeah, it's been good. But I'm happy to be back on.
Good. Yeah, it's quite nice to have a bit more of it. Well, hopefully people enjoy it anyway. To have it mixed up a little bit more, and because I just think Ben and Seb definitely offer something different to us as well, and we've all got people probably just appreciate just a change of voice rather than our monotone voices week in, week out.
I like to think I bring the comedy. They're the smart kids, and I sort of just bring the banter, I think. And you can all laugh at me for my transfers, such as Philip Foden.
Yeah, podcast host first, entertainer second, or whatever. How's things in general? You enjoyed the start of the season?
Just because it's good to be back, right? And we're let's face it, we're addicts. So when we don't have fantasy football, to me, I don't really like it. I know some people say they like the break and stuff, and I do for about a week, and then after that, I kind of want it back straight away. So I'm really happy that it's back, and we get to make decisions again and play the game. So that's all cool. I've kind of been enjoying it. It's been sort of mediocre, I guess, for me personally. Some of the 50-50s already kind of not going the way you want, and it's like, here we go again sort of thing. But that's the game we love, right? I'm sure I'll get a few of them right coming up. So yeah, happy. How about you?
Yeah, good. I had a fairly poor first couple of weeks, and then a really good third game week. I feel like it's been a pretty average start, I guess. And people always say, you don't need to worry about overall rank in the first few game weeks. And it's completely true. You really don't need to. Like, I think if your team's in a really good position, and you're in a position where it looks like you can be flexible in terms of wildcard rather than wildcard, many things to sort out on your team. So I think that's the main thing, and that's where you'll see the biggest gains made in like the first half of the season is when we get to that period. Whether that's in game week 8 or 9, or whether people hold it for later, we'll see. There'll even be some people doing it this week, I'm sure. I think I've done okay, and my most recent game week was pretty good because I bought Gusto in game week 2, benched him in that first game week, and then started him in game week 3. So got very lucky with those 2 assists. So I think they were like the only two, or felt like the only 2 chances he created. Really, he put a lot of crosses in, to be fair, and he is very attacking. But yeah, to get 2 assists from
it's absolutely dream world for that sort of thing, isn't it? I know you can have we all know he was attacking fullback and he's a decent player, but to get sort of 2 attacking returns and a clean sheet, even though it's a good fixture, is just like jackpot. That's why we play the game. Like him, even Udogie, and there's a few defenders that kind of been popping off lately. Like we love that stuff. That's what we're here for. So on that note about rank and stuff, I genuinely do not care, particularly at the beginning, like you say, at all. Like for me, the biggest gauge is really looking at mini leagues that are competitive that you're in, and just seeing how far away you are from the top guys, like presuming they haven't used chips, because I would suggest most competitive leagues players haven't actually used chips yet. So if you look at sort of the top 3 or 4 and you're kind of still within like 20, 30 points to begin with, then I would say that's like a pretty good start. That you can account for that many points in variance in 2 or 3 weeks, I would say, and that's fine. If you're already like 60, 70 points away from sensible leagues, then I'd probably start worrying. So that's where I kind of judge my start, and I'm doing comparatively pretty well to most people. We've all got the same teams pretty much. It's kind of like that Gusto and Udogie and a few little bits here or there that have had a couple, sort of a world star game week that have kind of made the difference, I guess, for a lot of people. But then even then, you could argue Gabriel. I don't claim any sort of magical insight on the Gabriel Saliba thing. The fact I was lucky enough to have Saliba means I was probably 20, 30 points on the people who have caught me back this week as a result of, just not having him and then have to moving for Gusto or Udogie. So
it's
all kind of equaled out already, I guess.
Yeah, and there's just, like you said, there's just a couple of things, isn't there? Like, for example, amongst engaged players, particularly the midfield, you've got Fernandes and Rashford in almost every team. And there's just a couple, it's just basically whether you have Mbeumo, Matoma, maybe Maddison, Richarlison, whoever in there, that's probably determined how good your start is. Plus the whole Gabriel James thing, whether you have one of those 2, that's probably impacted things. Or they may be evened out in some circumstances. And then who your third striker is. But then, even though that's been a differential within teams, people have had Pedro, Jackson, or Watkins generally, or Vissa, maybe some people. Like, there's not been a huge difference between them anyway, really, I don't think. Like, Pedro scored in the first week, then he's blanked 2 in a row. Watkins has got 3 assists in a row, but then he costs a bit more money, doesn't he? So you'd expect him to score more. And then I think probably Jackson owners have been a bit unlucky, the most unlucky, to be honest.
Yeah, Jackson's great. He's such a good player. Bigging him up at the beginning of the season, and then I don't own him. I went and got Alvarez, didn't I? Which, again, I'm not particularly unhappy about. I'm just unhappy about the fact he didn't really get any points, because I thought he really deserved them, at least based on the stats and what I was watching in that game. I mean, the fact that Haaland missed the penalty basically is inconsequential for everyone else. But when you've got Alvarez who got the assist for it, it does actually have an impact. I can already see loads of questions in the chat around stuff like to do with Foden and Perisic and all stuff. We will get to them, guys. I promise you.
We've basically got this episode. We've got 5 kind of main bigger questions, which I've kind of taken out from the replies we got on Twitter. Some of them just summarise the same question that lots of people are asking, and then others I picked out that are interesting. And then I've got kind of like 5 more quick fire questions at the end, which we'll go through with the questions in the chat as well. But yeah, we'll interact with you as we go as well. And I mean, I constantly make mistakes while I'm on this pod, so correct us as we go as well, please. Not just mispronouncing players' names though.
That's my specialty.
And so did you have Gabriel? You didn't have either Gabriel or James in the end then, though, or did you have James?
No, I got lucky there. I didn't genuinely. I didn't buy Reece James because I just feel he's too injury prone, and it happened, but. To say it was going to happen like game week 1 is a bit much, but that was fine. The Saliba Gabriel thing, I was happened to get the news, as simple as that. Yeah. So I was lucky there.
But to be fair, you were considering Saliba anyway. I remember because they were pretty similar on review, and I think you just fancied him because it was different.
Yeah, basically they were pretty much equal on review, which surprised me because Gabriel's goal threat was so good. And I did listen to the Arsenal pod beforehand about the fact that the inverting from different sides in Timber. I didn't actually think it would happen this quickly. I mean, I was putting tweets out saying, I think Arteta's got options this season and he might chop and change. I don't know if you saw that. I might try and become more like Pep now. He's got all these different options. And it seemed to happen straight off the bat, but I can't say that I felt that it was definitely going to be like that. But I just felt that Saliba was probably the more nailed player because Gabriel, as good as he is, he's obviously good at specific things. More than I would say going into wide areas and being dragged out of position. But I think people are saying now that it may even be something not tactical. It might be a person. I mean, we just don't have the information to it. I wouldn't rule that out totally either, to be honest. We just don't know. He's put 3 different people there now. I know Zinchenko hasn't actually played yet, and a lot of the talk is that when Zinchenko plays, Gabriel will play, and I kind of understand that. But we haven't actually had that come to fruition yet. I think this week is probably the first time where that is probably possible. Like Zinchenko's start. I guess if he doesn't play this one, you've got to say it's got to be something more than that. But either way, I'm happy not to have him because it's really unlucky, right? He was just such a good pick all of last season. I would still say he was a good pick at the beginning of the season, and people have just suffered as a result generally, outside of the Gusto or Udogie if you got lucky this week coming off the bench or whatever.
Yeah, but it feels like, I think most people have now corrected those or replaced those players now. Maybe some people still have one. I do actually still have Gabriel, and we'll be replacing this week. But there's a lot more dilemmas in midfield now in general, which is what some of our questions about. So I reckon we go to that question first, actually. So this question actually initially came in from Golden Goal Fantasy Football, which is a really good YouTube channel, by the way, if you've not checked it out. But his question was basically Eze, Maddison, Sterling, or Bowen. But I also just I think you've got to throw Foden into there as well. And then in Mbeumo as well, because not everyone has him. I guess of those 6 midfielders, if let's say you didn't own, let's say you didn't own any of them, like which one would you be prioritising, and what would, if you think it's close, what would determine which one you go for? Do you have any kind of strong feelings on that?
It's hard to answer, I guess, because I mean I've got Mbeumo and Foden. I haven't got any of the others. I don't have Sterling, Bowen, Maddison, Eze. Did you say? For me, I really wanted Maddison, and I think I just talked pre-season. I mean, pre-season the plan was Maddison in game week 3 for the good fixture run. I was going to leave him out game week 1 and 2, see how it worked, and then make that transfer. And I had Havertz in that place, right? Ultimately, I should have just started with. I shouldn't have even pre-booked it apparently, and I should have had Maddison. But it's easy to say now because Havertz games were great, and potentially he could even been up front. So, happy with the decision. The outcome probably wasn't what I wanted. Maddison was great, and then I was always going to bring him in this week, and then obviously the injury happened, right, or the lack of an injury, but at least the doubt. So as a result, I didn't bring him in. I couldn't bring him in with that flag, I guess. It just seems silly. So I would say Maddison is my favourite out of all of them because that's what I would have done had I known he was fit and played. And I just think if you drag out the fixture tick, I mean, it depends again, I suppose, on Wildcard and stuff, but I'd say Tottenham's immediate 2 fixtures, I think it's Burnley and Sheffield United, are really good. Then they have like Arsenal, Liverpool, which obviously not great. But then if you extend out the ticker to sort of like 10 games up to like game week 13, they're right at the top on Fantasy Football Scout anyway, or certainly them and Newcastle are right near the top. So I think fixture wise, like long term, if you're not planning to wildcard game week 9, or even if you are, he's a good pick. I just like him because all those options are great, but I think the fact that he takes some set pieces, the fact that he's at least in the conversation for penalties, I do think Son will take them, by the way, but I think he's in the conversation. Just give him that little bit of edge. I mean, Eze's in that bracket as well because he has the set pieces and the penalties, but I just don't think they're as good a team.
Sterling's in that conversation though, potentially, just because we've not seen a taker since Enzo missed.
No, but I suppose because he doesn't have the set pieces, right? Sure. He is definitely in there, but I think that's what just gives me the edge with Maddison. Is I just think and there's barely anything in it. I think they're all extremely close on expected points on everything, right? It's just my personal preference is Maddison because I just think he's probably likely to be more involved in most of the goals, like for Spurs. But this is gut feeling. It's not coming from anywhere else other than that. I would add that he's already had that injury doubt, and he has got quite a history of picking up knocks and niggles. So that would be a slight worry whether he can last. But I have a slight preference for him. I think you've got the stats to say exactly who review prefers, but that's my personal preference.
Yeah, well, I suppose the main things I would add to that. So the names I mentioned in terms of Bowen and Eze, I just wouldn't consider them personally. When you look at it and review whatever time period you look at, they kind of come out nowhere near the other 4. Mbeumo is like, if you look at it over the next 5 game weeks, 12 game weeks, or 2 game weeks, Mbeumo comes out on top. But obviously bear in mind this is the default expected minutes. So I'd say if you've not got Mbeumo, he's definitely one to prioritise. But whether you do that this week immediately, you could prioritise another one this week if you prefer the fixture, for example, if you know you're going to get both anyway. But Mbeumo is it's surprising how high he comes, how high up he comes. It just obviously massively rates Brentford's fixtures and his ability, the fact we know he's on penalties as well. But I basically think with Maddison and Sterling, it's really close. So what you need to do is actually look at your future transfers and see if you need that extra money. So for me, I know that if I get Maddison, I won't be able to afford Trippier next game week, which is or this game week, which is the plan. So for me, it just becomes a no-brainer straight away because of the advantage of having Trippier over, I don't know, Shah, for example, where you've got more attacking threat from a player from the same team. So I think with those two, I think you just look to see if you need that extra money or not. Like, I don't know, what is it, like 0.7 difference between them or something like that. Then if you need that, and there's a considerable difference in the quality of your team overall in terms of what you do with that money, I think that makes plenty of sense to go for Sterling. But I wouldn't go for Foden personally, but it's just a minutes thing. I just really don't. I just never trust Pep, and like what happened on the weekend wasn't an I told you so at all. He just happened to be ill, and actually I didn't own Foden, but even though he came on and got the assist, like his owners were really unlucky because to get 4 points is bad. Yeah,
I think an ignored factor there though is, and it is part of the Foden obviously got ill, but I think there are, and maybe this is brave of me to say, but I think there are other players in other teams where if they were slightly had the sniffles, because clearly he could still play, right? He travelled and he came onto the pitch and he played, right? I know they needed the goal and it's the last few minutes. I think if that was Watkins, for example, he starts the game. So that is the thing with Man City. I do think that even in those situations, they're so well blessed in so many areas and have such, amazing players as backups that even though it's unlucky, and I got Foden myself, right? The fact that he got ill and they can just say, oh no, we've got someone else who can play in your position. I think that is a factor, like a little bit more than other teams. I don't think they'd drop Watkins if he had a nose or his arsehole's falling out or whatever was happening to Foden. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you probably are right. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, it's okay. Emil's saying in the chat, I've opted for Sterling as Saka to Maddison in game week 8 makes sense to me. I just want to say that I think if you are wildcarding in game week 9, I do actually prefer Sterling because I think the fixtures up until game week 9 are actually better. And even if you're not wildcarding, I guess if you've got a planned transfer maybe to take him out, that is better because Sterling's fixtures from 9 are Arsenal, Brentford, Tottenham, Man City, Newcastle. I think he's still value, and you could hold him through that, like not a problem. But yeah, that's why I said Maddison for sort of the long term, Sterling for the short term would be my picks there. And if you're doing that game week 9 wildcard, then Sterling hopefully just sits there.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that Foden conversation is it's probably more to do with the fact he missed the day before. So he might have been fine. We don't know. He might have been fine on that match day or felt loads better. But ultimately, if he missed training the day before, it might be he just had like some symptoms of a cold, so they just been removed him from the squad. He might have felt fine.
You're not gonna play if you miss the day's training before the game with Pep. He focuses on that game plan for that, and I'm sure most managers will do that, right? The tactical setup for that game plan, and they just presume he's not going to be there, basically.
You're definitely right that managers would make an exception for a player like Watkins, where he's just like talisman's the word, isn't it? He's just the main man, plays that role. But Foden, you can just slot someone else in. Or it could have been that he genuinely was struggling. If anyone's ever even just played 5-a-side with a cold, you struggle to breathe. It's the same for an elite athlete.
Forget having a cold. I don't even need that. I'm struggling to breathe after 5 minutes.
It might have been that he just thought I probably can only he might have even said I don't think I can start the game. So it's hard to know. But I think look at us being so humble, arguing for each other. But I think Foden owners were pretty unlucky, even though they were lucky from the moment he came on because he got something. But if you look at the big picture, the fact that he only got 4 points, I would say that was fairly unlucky. But yeah, I didn't particularly like him as an asset anyway, just because of the minutes compared to Sterling particularly.
That's fine, but I think when you take the gamble, I know most analytical players who play with the minutes and stuff, they don't like these picks, right? Because they know that they're not probably the best picks, and I suppose they're a little bit scared sometimes. I'm just going to say it, that they could actually hurt them because they're a suboptimal pick potentially, and then they can go crazy because they know they are good players. That's my thought process. Anyway. But when you are looking forwards to the game week, because you're pretty sure there's pretty much nothing that can stop him starting in this game. Like people may say that's brave, but I think everything was lined up for him to play this game, and then he gets ill. And then they only score like 2 goals. I think the game is totally different if Foden plays. I genuinely believe that game would not be, essentially 2-1 in the last minute or close. I think there would be a lot more goals in the game if Foden had started. And it's really disheartening to be looking forward to the game the whole week because it is a fantastic fixture. And I suppose we've got a chance for it to make it up now, but we really need Foden to go crazy now in this home Fulham game if he's going to play to kind of make up for it. And I really hope that happens because it's just so disheartening, right? You bring in these players they're a little bit different. The fixture's fantastic. You've got the best team in the league, and then they just don't even get on the pitch. That's the most frustrating thing. Yeah. Well, they do, but barely.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think, game week 8 or something last season, that exact thing happened when everyone bought him. He started the first 8 in a row or something like that, and then immediately was benched for 3 in a row. And then Hardman struggles for the rest of the season to get back in the team. So yeah, it is brutal that it can just happen. It can happen so immediately. Yeah, but you know that better than anyone. I guess moving on from that, because there's been a lot of discussion this week about whether you should move early for players. And we had we had a few questions about that. Seb actually was one of the people that asked the question. Knowledge versus catching a price rise was basically how he summarised it. And I thought it was just a good thing to talk about because I've definitely changed my mind in it more. I mean, literally in the last couple of weeks. If you go back and listen to the pod last week, me and Seb would just talk a lot about how you just need to value information is really, really important. So make sure you have all that before you make a decision, etc. If the difference is only 0.1. Whereas actually, I think because of some of the stuff I've read on Twitter this week from some people far cleverer than me, I've probably actually changed my mind on that slightly. But I still think it's very, very messy in terms of how you determine that. And the reason that was discussed this week a lot is because, it was being discussed anyway, and then Sterling wasn't in the squad yesterday. And so lots of people were, I think mostly jokingly, implying that he was obviously injured just to annoy people that had bought him in early. Me being one of those. But yeah, what is the tweet I saw initially was actually from FPL Kiwi. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should. Just really interesting guy. He posts a lot of stuff in terms of FPL and data. And his tweet said, not doing your actual preferred move and choosing to lose out on price changes seems wild to me. I've seen people hold through a double price change, which is when the holder and the faller both move in price. And he said that's worth at least 1.5 points. I just thought that was really interesting because he also described the value of having extra information as 0.5 points, which I asked him about, and he said it's somewhere in that range, which is why that's the value that review puts on it, and you can actually edit that value. I just asked him a bit about actually how do we determine how much value it's worth. having 0.1 of value, and he told me to talk to FPL Trout, who again you should all follow on Twitter. And then he showed me this graph, which I'm going to do my best to kind of explain to you guys who are listening, which I'll probably mess up. But so this graph basically shows you you've got down the left hand side the optimized projected amount of points you'd expect to get over a 12 game week, the next 12 game weeks. And then you've got the starting amount that you have within the bank and how that changes over time. So you can see here that as you have more money in your bank, the average of points you expect to get per game week, this is for the next 12, increases. And it actually may not look like a lot, but for example, if you look at 99 on that graph where it's about 62.4, then go up to 100 where it's about 62.7, you can see that basically that 1 million is worth about 0.35 points per game week across the course of a season. And when I asked him about this as well, he also explained that it's pretty consistent with previous seasons as well. So essentially the take-home message is actually, but that 0.1 actually can have a really big impact. 0.35 points per game week is a lot if you have a 1 million more in team value than someone else when you're wildcarding, for example. Whereas it's like previously, it's something I've like massively ignored and thought I definitely want more information. But like my main caveat to this would be this is only really applies when you're really certain on your move, I guess. Because if you're not certain on that move, that value of having information increases even more. And that value of having information is also, the value of going early. That's also more risky if your bench is worse, and it's going to maybe easier for an analytical player to say this who probably has a heavier bench, for example, and maybe that's one of the reasons why Review likes a heavier bench. Tosdiv says, is this with a wild card every week? No, I don't think so. I think this is just a projection for the next 12 game weeks. If you were to set a team now based on how much money you had, how much the average points would be per game week. But yeah, I just found it really interesting to actually see numbers put on it. And yeah, it's definitely changed my mind in terms of I'd definitely be more likely to make earlier transfers now, even if there's a risk of a player missing out. Because what you're risking in terms of maybe having to bench them, actually sometimes you only have to bench them for a week as well, so it's not necessarily always the worst case scenario if suddenly a player's out for 2 months and you're immediately doing a -4 to bring in the alternative. And that added team value is probably worth it. And yeah, that's particularly in this period of the season when the price changes are more volatile. Hopefully I've explained that fairly well. But I just thought it was really worth mentioning. But I don't know, what do you do, Luke, in terms of, do you tend to move early on players, or has that changed over time since you've played the game at all?
I used to obviously move early all the time and even take hits and stuff when I didn't particularly care about rank. If the guys were going up that I want and I wasn't going to be able to afford them, I thought it was, I'm going to miss out. That was the general feeling. I don't think that's necessarily the way to think, because the thing is, there's so many times where a very good player has a very good fixture and they are terrifying not to own, but quite often that you don't really get as punished as you think you might. And often actually, if making a hit to do the move will actually end up being negative. So I've learned to sort of quash that a little bit. I will say it's still one of the most painful things for me in fantasy to do, when you really have a feeling that you really want this person for this fixture and you think they're going to do really well, and then you don't do it because it might be a hit or whatever reason you can't, there's a higher priority transfer, and then they go on to score really well. But it doesn't happen that often. It's just that those are the ones you kind of remember, I guess, and you're like, oh, for God's sake, I really should have just done it, and beat yourself up about it for not doing it. But yeah, that's a subside. I think in general, like, I will play it where if my player's going down and the other person's going up, so if I think there's going to be like a 0.2, 0.3 change, then generally I will do the move like early, only if absolutely forced, like on the final night that I can get away with it, like most people probably do. And there's literally no other option. But it's judged on an individual basis. I don't have any hard and fast rules really, but generally if it's sort of like 2 or 3 difference, then I'll probably do it, especially early on. And again, especially if you've got 2 free transfers or a wild card in the back pocket. I know you don't want to blow it, but let's say you do that and then that someone else gets injured in your team and then another 2 people get injured and you're like, right, I'm absolutely screwed. Then you have got the wild card. Now, I do genuinely think like the value of the wild card is like not as strong as long as I'm talking about the players like us that have probably picked pretty good teams, like to begin with, on paper at least. Like if I was to wildcard now, I genuinely don't think I would change that many players, and I think most people would be in the same situation. So I don't really think that it's as valuable as people think, and there's no particular fixture changes right now. So it's like, well, if I have to use it now to get myself out of trouble, then I'm not that worried about it, and I will just do it because, yeah, there's no obvious. It's not like in past seasons, I guess, where it's been like a more obvious time to use it. I think this season, like, yes, people talk about between 8 and 9. But outside that, it's probably just hold on for as late as you can. So I don't really think it's like a massive loss, because the other thing that makes me think that is on review, if I sold for my team up to game week 8-9 with a view to wildcard in game week 9, my transfers are pretty much exactly the same as if I didn't wildcard in game week 9. Yeah. Like it doesn't take me down a different path. So could I get away with not wildcard in game week 9? Well, apparently, at least up until that point, I could quite comfortably. So yeah, I'd be more happy and more inclined to make the transfers early on. Later on in the season, maybe not as much. I think maybe we, probably have a deeper bench, and therefore I'm not as worried.
Yeah, and that's one of the key things is when I chatted to Kiwi and Trout about it. Something so funny saying that, such random words. But when I chat to them about it, like both the things they emphasise is actually putting a value on information is really difficult. And the key thing is this is just really average. So actually there is a lot of judgment calls. So for example, if Chelsea were playing I know they're not in the Champions League, but if they had a Champions League fixture this midweek, suddenly the value of having that information about Sterling is suddenly higher, and it's riskier to go early. So it's just a lot of judgment in place, and it's also, I think, just how you take on information as well. Like I often just can't be bothered thinking about my transfers till later in the week, and that's one of the reasons I don't go early. Probably, and it would probably be better at the game. Minimally, if I just thought about that maybe earlier in the week, that would maybe mean there was a few times I went earlier with my transfers. So it also depends how you play the game slightly.
I would also add as well, now in the era that we're in, depending on which teams play first and whether we have a Friday night game, the amount of leaks that we get actually affect it massively. So like last week where it was Chelsea Luton, and I don't think anyone cared about the Luton team particularly, and the Chelsea team was pretty well known probably who it was going to be. We didn't have any leaks for anyone else. Like going early wasn't as bad because you probably wouldn't have missed out. Now I think if you go in some weeks, if you go early and it's like loads of teams are playing at 3:00, 18, we could potentially have so many leaks before the deadline that you're actually sacrificing a lot of information for that 0.1 potentially, which is a sad state of affairs, but it's true, right? Everyone seems to get these leaks miles before the deadline. So yeah, in those weeks, I would be very, very opposed to doing early transfers if you can help it.
Yeah, definitely. And even like last week, I rolled my transfer last week, but I was like on Twitter about 15 minutes before the deadline, just waiting to see if Gusto was starting, and I was pretty confident he would start, but I was ready to make a transfer just in case. So yeah, it massively impacts the way you play in general. And if I was thinking about a transfer, and I did consider it a few times, but say I was like really, really right up until deadline, that could be the difference between me making a transfer elsewhere or not. So that comes into it as well in terms of how valuable that information is. More valuable if you're transferring as a player like Foden, and Foden happens to play Friday night. Yeah, for sure. So there's loads to consider, but I just found it really interesting that the kind of the default and on average it is good to go early and okay to risk it, because I just kind of assumed it would be the other way around. I guess let's move on to another question. So let's go on to some Man City stuff, I reckon. So in general, there were quite a few questions about Man City, as you can imagine. We had one about Rico Lewis from Michael Lowe, whether he's an option. We had do Nunes, Doku and Palmer impact Foden and Alvarez. That was from two people, Fifons and Red Wizard. And then a question about Pep, how he keeps making very minimal substitutions or makes only a couple but late in the game. And do you see that as a trend that keeps on, is likely to keep happening? But yeah, I'll let you answer these. Luke, I've rambled enough there, and people will be interested in what you have to say on City in general. So I've thrown 3 questions at you in one go.
Yeah, I just want to caveat that again, and I say it all the time, I am just some guy at home on Twitter. Like these are just my thoughts. I know I've done pretty well at predicting Pep, but I want to throw it out there that there's, that you have to be in that group to predict in Pep, and there's only about sort of 40 to 50 people that have done well and done it, and I could have just been a little bit lucky. So we're all guessing here. So I wouldn't value my information particularly higher than most other people. So I just want to throw that out there, right?
But do you have Pep's number or not?
I don't have Pep's number. Okay. He could do anything crazy. I could be totally wrong. Let's throw that out there. But Rico Lewis, Michael Lowe. Yeah, I don't think Rico Lewis is an option personally. Like I would never have him. But if you've got him, then yeah, it's difficult. I wouldn't really be starting him. The benefit to Rico Lewis was in the system he was playing last season, which was the 5 back, 5 forward, 3-2-2-3, as some people call it. Rico Lewis was kind of the backup for John Stones, inverting from the right back into midfield. Now, with John Stones getting injured and Rico Lewis starting the first game, I can see why people kind of did it, because they potentially could have got a really good option who was going to play while Stones was out. Not that they knew how long Stones was out at that point, I don't think, by the way, so it was still a bit risky. But now he doesn't seem to be playing that setup at all. He actually has one of the centre-backs step into midfield, and he's using Kyle Walker to go down the right back into right wing. And he's not really using the same setup. Now, that could change, but at the moment, he doesn't seem to be changing it. So where does Sterling fit into that setup? Well, to be honest, the only way I can really see him even playing in the team is if he was to play instead of Kyle Walker and actually hug the touchline and play with some width, which we've not really seen Rico Lewis do before. So I don't really know where he fits in that setup, because obviously Kovacic and Rodri playing as the pivots means that they're not really having that midfielder. I'm sorry, that right back step into midfield. They're having one of the centre backs step in and help them a little bit, but that's not Rico Lewis. So the only way I can see him playing at the moment is really in place of Kyle Walker down the right, which I guess could happen, but it just seems really unlikely. So I don't really like him as a pick, unfortunately. Doku, Nunes, and Palmer, how do they impact Foden and Alvarez? I suppose they do, because ultimately there's more bodies for him to pick, and he can only put 11 out there on the pitch. I think Nunes is probably a Rodri and Kovacic kind of backup. Don't really see him in advanced areas particularly. Again, I could be totally wrong on that, but I think he's more just a utility player, and they need, just because they've got such low numbers and they play in so many competitions, I would be surprised if he affects things that much, but I guess we'll see. Palmer leaving doesn't really change much, because obviously they've got Doku in, so it's kind of like a switch around there, and obviously Palmer was kind of filling in for Mahrez, so ultimately you've just kind of got a right winger. Now, I think that will affect Foden and Alvarez, because again, I'm only going by the current setup. At the moment, the right winger actually comes in as a dual 10, and there's no De Bruyne, so I'm going to bring a team up. In fact, do you want to bring it up, Sam? I think you've got it on one of the slides, haven't you?
Yeah. Can you see that?
It's on a bit of a delay. I can't see it yet.
Okay, it is showing now.
Oh yeah, I can see it. Okay, so I think this is kind of like the generic team at the moment that you'll see in most games in the setup they've got. I was a bit skeptical around Kovacic and how much he would actually play. But I think last week, the fact that he actually started in a game versus Sheffield United, I thought maybe they wouldn't use him in a game like that, but they did. And he's played so well in that position. Makes me think that he's going to play in more than I anticipated. So suddenly, if you look at that team, right, we know De Bruyne's out. Where does Bernardo Silva go? Like, Bernardo Silva's obviously a very good player, and he's not going to play every game, but you want him on the pitch more than you don't. So yeah, it's pretty much Foden, Alvarez, and Grealish. Out of all those three, one of them could miss out for Bernardo Silva. So Foden could even go to left wing instead of Grealish, or Alvarez could drop out and Foden could go in 10. And then you throw Doku in there as well. And we're back to what we said before. Like, Doku could play as that right winger. It would be a slightly different setup in my mind there, because, as I said, Foden comes to 10 and Kyle Walker holds the width. So it's just too hard to answer right now. But ultimately, there's good players missing out, and they are going to get minutes, right? So, I mean, I'll throw it back to you. Where do you think Bernardo Silva comes in for Phil Foden in this setup then for some of the games? Because that's where he usually plays at the moment, right on the right wing.
Yeah, I think he does probably for some of them, but I just can't. I just think it's so hard to know which games those are. But then,
yeah, and then if people are saying, well, Foden definitely plays, well, does Alvarez miss out then?
Yeah, I don't know.
Again, I can't. If people are asking me because they're in the same situation, they're not sure. And yeah, you can't have 12, 13 players on the pitch. So the logical conclusion is that players will end up getting subbed and they will miss games occasionally. Like that is the bottom line. That's what's going to happen. I don't think they're absolutely nailed and going to play every game. There's nothing else I can say. Like, if you go there, the fixtures are good. You've got a good chance of getting decent minutes. But it's only a matter of time, I would say, before Doku starts getting integrated into the team. It may even happen as quick as this week. Bernardo Silva can't really miss out that often in that setup, especially if he wants to play Kovacic. I think the best way, what I'm hoping actually, is that Grealish starts playing a little bit less and Foden actually plays on that left side. So he actually goes for Bernardo Silva in the Phil Foden position now, and Foden actually plays over on Grealish's side.
You don't see anyone ever considering Grealish, do you?
No, I think he might miss out occasionally a little bit more, because I think in games like home to Fulham, do you really, like, Grealish is a great player, but I don't think you actually need Grealish as much as Pep maybe thinks he does. But he obviously knows more than me. I just think that maybe you could get away with it.
Yeah, sure.
It's very convoluted. Whenever we start talking about Man City, it just becomes a mess. But there's a reason why. There is a reason why.
I feel like I'm in the same position as everyone who's asking the questions, to be honest. I don't like... I could contribute and say, maybe Silva will come in for Foden. That means Foden's more to play centrally than Alvarez, but I have no idea, if I'm being totally honest. I would just be guessing.
Yeah, well, Alvarez just keeps playing, and all the information we have is that he pretty much plays when De Bruyne doesn't. He's been taking set pieces. He's second on penalties. Like, he's really good value. I think he's a good pick, but the question remains, when Bernardo Silva comes into this team, or Doku,
which one?
Grealish, Alvarez, Foden, one or two of them might end up missing out.
Yeah, I definitely.
They're not going to just not play any.
Would you say in general that Grealish, is way more likely to be Foden and Alvarez than Grealish?
It seems so, yeah. I mean, Grealish missed one game already, I think. You think he didn't start the Burnley game, is that right? Pretty sure he didn't start the Burnley game.
Yeah, but that's not what people want to hear, Luke.
No. The run's good. You just got to take it on the chin. If you go in there, you could get lucky. And that's part of the appeal, I guess, is that their ownership will actually stay relatively low against the people you're competing against, I guess. Yeah. So you could get lucky as a result, but there's other guys that play all the time, so you know what to do.
Yeah, sure. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that, Luke, particularly?
Not really. Just, if you do it, good luck. You're a kin. You're one of my brethren. I wish you good luck, because I've actually got Alvarez and Foden in my team, so I've gone all in, and I hope it works out. But I'm very skeptical.
Yeah. Cool. We had one question that. We had one question that literally just said, how bad are Luton? From FPL Fish. And so I guess based on that, I just looked at some of the spread market odds, and then I chatted to Simon, Analytical FPL, on Twitter, because he runs his own model which kind of predicts future points, etc., to kind of get his thoughts on it. And I guess the short answer to that is that they're pretty bad, but they're probably not as bad as like Derby County level when they're in the Premier League and got like 13 points or something, based on what we know at the moment. And obviously that is primarily at the moment just based on last season's data, the fact they're probably one of the weakest teams that's ever come up from the Championship. So spread market odds have them getting 27.7 points this season. Simon's model has them only getting 31. So definitely they're definitely one of the weaker teams that the Premier League seen in recent years. And it looks like, if you watch that Chelsea game, it certainly looks like they're a team to target. But I don't think we should be expecting like 13 points from them, for example, based on what we know so far. But yeah, it definitely doesn't. They seem like, of all the teams in the league, they're the team to target at the moment. And yeah, Everton look woeful.
Yeah.
As well.
I'll just add though, like on team projections and stuff, like they're obviously fantastic, but they are still working with essentially some guesswork, because Luton haven't been in the Premier League and playing these kind of teams before. So they, it could be far better or far worse. There's a large margin of error, I think, potentially in these projections in a team such as that, because they're working with, not information from the Premier League. So
yeah.
We all know that doesn't necessarily carry over in certain situations. So, yeah, I think a lot of it's going to come down to, like, I still can't believe, and I've said it before, that Luton have come away to Chelsea. They've played two centre forwards, and then they've played wing backs incredibly high up the pitch, and then they've played Chong and Barkley as part of the midfielders. Like, to me, they're two attacking midfielders. They've basically left Nkamba on his own to defend versus like the entire team. Versus world-class midfielders in Caicedo and Enzo and stuff like that, or maybe not world-class, but certainly on the way to or close to. Like, to me, that if they're going to continue to set up like that, then that's pretty scary, I would say, for like you definitely want to be targeting. But the thing is, will they learn? So many times this kind of happens with team. I think you can even point to
Forest last season, maybe they're an
yeah,
example of that.
Exactly that. Like I still think Forest are pretty bad, but I think they, tried to learn as they went along and have tried to become a better team as a result. Maybe Luton will start to change the way they play, but when you're not going to have any of the ball whatsoever, I guess what's gone through the manager's mind is he's just going to hope that they can sort of scare and surprise them on a few set pieces. They can attack them from the off, like, 2 forwards, 2 attacking midfielders, maybe get 1 or 2 goals, and maybe they'd changed him up to try and defend the lead. I don't know, but maybe he just thought, I'm going to lose the game anyway, let's go for it. But that's the kind of teams we want to be targeting in FPL, teams that want to go for it rather than sit deep, I guess, most of the time.
Yeah, considering you're not going to be ultimately you're not going to be buying a Luton defender for clean sheets, aren't you, anyway?
So, no. Yeah. No, I think you'd be very brave if you, and also very lucky if you actually get them. So on the questions like Bowen and stuff, like is Bowen, obviously this week, I mean, if you were having a free hit team, yeah, you'd probably have a hell of a lot of West Ham players in it. But then, to bring people in and out all the time is quite hard. But I don't know. With Luton, it still remains to be seen how they're going to set up. I would have thought they are going to learn and probably play slightly differently. We'll have to see. The brief will be in the pudding.
Yeah, I mean, Everton is another one where I just think I was convinced they were going to go down last season. I'm just convinced they're going to go down again, to be honest. Nothing changed my mind so far in terms of what I've seen so far this season in terms of Everton. Just think they're just not really. I guess there's lots of talk of them having financial issues, and whether if they had gone down last year, they'd have been in huge trouble financially, I think. So that's probably therefore impacted their spending for this season. I just think, yeah, they're just like woeful, just so bad defensively, which is funny because we both have Pickford. What we're expecting.
Don't know why. Well, I do. The fixtures were there, but
yeah. But we're not even getting the saves. That's the annoying thing. They're just conceding like a couple of really big chances at the moment. Some of their players are actually pretty good, but I saw rumours Iwobi wants to leave now as well. I think that would be a big loss. He's injured, isn't he, Iwobi, as well? I think.
I didn't know that, but
I could be wrong.
I think Onana's a good player. Like I do think they have got a few good players, but they've still got Michael Keane at the back, and I know they just signed this Beto, but I know nothing about him. But they can't score a goal.
Yeah. It's Calvert-Lewin that's a big problem, isn't it? Like, yeah, if he was playing really regularly, yeah, he is injured. Oh no, he's not. Sorry, I think I've just made that up.
No, he fractured his cheekbone, didn't he? Oh, you're talking about Iwobi. Sorry, yeah.
Oh yeah, Iwobi is injured. Anyway, Calvert-Lewin's just such a good player, isn't he? He's just one of those players. He's really good when he's on the pitch. He was just like Callum Wilson in that way.
Well, I suppose he was. I think it's been so long since he's been on the pitch. It's hard to say whether it's actually affected him too much.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure. I mean, he's better than what they've got. There's no question there.
Yeah.
I think Maupay's like top of the. I was looking at non-penalty XGI over the 3 game weeks, and Maupay's like in the top 3 per 90. I know he's not played massive amounts of minutes, but so the chances were there for him. It's just that. It's Maupay, unfortunately. So Calvert-Lewin, something different might have happened.
Yeah, cool. We'll move on to our kind of like last main question that we kind of set aside. Then we'll go through some of them in the chat and some of the smaller ones. So I had a question about basically FPL review settings and the impact they can have and how you can adjust them, which I quite enjoyed actually. Reminding myself actually because a lot of the advanced settings I don't ever adjust actually. So it's interesting. I found it interesting just reading over them again. So what I've got here, this is basically what you see when you show the advanced settings on review. So I just thought I'd just quickly go through them and kind of give some examples of times when you might adjust them. So top left, free transfer value, which is 1.5 as standard. That's basically how much you value having free transfers available. So if you had that set at 0, you would always make a transfer if there's the tiniest increase in EV you're going to get. So if there's a transfer you can make this game week that's going to get you a 0.1 increase in EV, where it's almost 99% of situations you would just roll that transfer because there's more value in having the information and transfer next week. You would make that transfer. If you increased it, you'd be more to save transfers. So I guess times when that you might choose to edit that would be if you knew you were wildcarding the next game week, or you might be wildcarding soon and you just want to attack immediate game weeks, or maybe towards the back end of the season possibly. Do you think, Luke? I don't know, have you ever messed with that one?
Well, I think you can also just tweak it because that's the kind of manager that you are. I think one of the questions that Eric Ness Ossenda, sorry, I don't know how to say his surname, but he's a poker player. I know he played Champ Man with me. He says, with money seemingly no issue, can models be tweaked to the idea of hopping on and off assets? For instance, Rashford to Bowen this game week, then Bowen to Maddison the next week, but on and on. So essentially taking those almost 1 week punts of doing Rashford to Bowen and stuff. And this is how you do that. If you put free transfer value down to like 0 and your team's well set up, the model will start suggesting intricate plans as it puts it. So it will say like, yeah, Bowen's likely to outscore Rashford this week. So if it's enough to make the transfer, as in the EV difference is high enough, it will say to do that move. The problem you get with this kind of play is obviously if you run into problems, if new information comes out, injuries, suspensions, weak benches, suddenly you end up with a team where you've got 3 or 4 problems to fix because you can't guarantee that transfer of Bowen to Maddison the week after, right? You might be stuck with Bowen, which might not be a bad thing. I haven't looked at the fixtures, but I think it's not a great one afterwards. So it comes down to, I guess, that's the value they've put on as default, but that's up to you as the individual to say how risky you want to be, how intricate do you want your plan to be. And I will lower mine quite often because that's the kind of manager I'll be. I'll put mine down to like 1.3, 1.2, and I'll even bring it right down when, like you say, the horizon's like 2 or 3 game weeks. If I'm wildcard in game week 9, then in game week 7 and 8, that'll be right down.
Yeah, and time decay is another example of that. So for example, time decay is basically how much value it puts on more immediate game weeks. So I think 0.85 is a standard. I think that means that let's say it's game week, what is it now? Game week 4, that means it would put 85% of value on game week 5, and then that would gradually reduce over time. So if that number's higher, it will put more value overall in game weeks in the future. And if you were to lower that massively, it would focus loads on just like your immediate plans, kind of what you're talking about there about not valuing free transfers as much. So I guess that's another example of that, and you might change that decay if you knew you're wildcarding really soon and it's going to either be in 4 or 5 game weeks you're going to wildcard. That's when you might choose to decrease that. Whereas if you were setting up and you knew I want to leave my wildcard for as late as possible, you might increase that above 0.85, and that might be an example of where the solver might want you to get Maddison, for example, rather than Sterling, based on what we discussed earlier of actually really, really long term. Maddison has the better fixtures and saving transfers. So that's another example of that.
If you've got and you probably shouldn't have this confidence about it, but if you say you're convinced the player is going to be great from now to the end of the season, like nothing's going to change, does we know like Maddison's great, for example, there's nothing that could possibly decay him outside of injury, then that should be at 1. Essentially, you're saying you're getting him. 1 is that value where his value doesn't necessarily change. So you can do that if you've got 3 weeks to go to a wild card, then you could maybe change the free transfer value down and put the decay at 1. So you're saying that their value is going to be as good this week as it is in 2 and 3 weeks as a percent of their total EV. I mean, not like they're going to have the same EV every week, but they're going to be at 100% of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you would naturally see that decay over time anyway, just because of a player can pick up an injury, etc. And then solver depth is basically the number of game weeks that it considers, which you probably already know. Solver speed is, I think, how much the detail at which it runs that, essentially. So if you have it on a really fast speed, it's not going to give you as accurate a result as if you have it on a really slow speed and the solve takes ages. In the bank value, you might edit. In fact, we were discussing this before the pod, me and Luke, because there was another question actually about whether review accounts for price changes. And if you know that you're going to be 0.1 short of a move, and say, for example, you want Trippier in game week 5, and there's a good chance he's going to go up in price between now and then, you might just change your in the bank value to 0 or is that a good example? You might, in that situation, you might increase it. I've lost my train of thought.
In the bank value, as far as I understand it on this screen, isn't actually your total.
Of course,
value of
you're
your
right.
team.
Yeah.
It's how much weighting it puts on having the spare money. So if you could therefore change that weighting, like you really value having money in your bank to therefore make future moves, and you don't want it to use the full amount, or you do want it to use the full amount and use the maximum you've got available. So again, the default's at 0.1, but you can change that either way. If you want to actually take money off of your team, then you can actually do that in the main page, and you can say, I trick the solver essentially, and just say, oh, I've actually got, 100 million rather than 105, because then you want to see what happens if you can't afford that in the future. So I think that one of the questions was, if you want to get Trippier in, but you don't make the move today and you're convinced that someone will go up or down, so you won't be able to afford Trippier in 2 weeks, then what will my team look like? Because the solver doesn't know that. Well, take money out of your team, change that value, and then see what you would do instead. And then presumably it would buy someone like Botman instead, but it might give you a different plan. So then you can say, okay, how different is that plan? How different is the value between them? And therefore, do I need to consider this or not?
Yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there completely. Yeah, so that's how much it values what having money in the bank.
Information, how much it values having that information.
So if you were to increase that, it would be more likely to suggest moves that enable other moves in the future, because you're keeping money, it's valuing the money you've got in the bank to make future moves, etc. As well, what have we got here? Free transfer burn value. That's similar to free transfer value, but kind of the opposite. So if you give that more weight, it would make it more likely. It would make the solver more likely to be conservative with its moves. Whereas if you hit that to 0, it will be really greedy with really intricate solves, basically. Similar to how you adjust free transfer value, but kind of the other way around. Info value is what we kind of discussed earlier around, like, it probably should be about 0.5. But I wonder if this could be adjusted actually based on the immediate game week. Depending on how much you think that information is valuable for that game week. As well, risk position is basically it's kind of like to do with EO and whether it kind of takes into account effective ownership. So if you increase risk position, it will play a lot more safer, and by default it doesn't account for EO at all. But if you were to increase that, it will play a lot more safe, and if there's two players that are close, it's going to go for the one with the higher EO, for example. And if there are two players, if you have that, if you can actually move that into the negatives. So if you move that to -1, for example, that's when if it was close between two players, you might lose a bit of EV, but it'll suggest the move with the higher upside where you own a player that's only 1% owned. So that's the kind of thing you might want to adapt later in the season based on your aim in terms of overall rank, or in terms of where you want to finish in your mini league. I guess the last one that might just be worth explaining is subweight as well, which is how much value you put in your bench. And I guess there's another one where you could decrease if you know you're going to wildcard soon, for example, and you've got time then to sort out your bench anyway.
Yeah, it's one where I guess the horizon again, if say it's like 3 weeks and you're going to wildcard and you're pretty comfortable with your bench, you don't want to even consider your bench because you want to go all out for those 3 weeks, then you put it at 0 basically, and you just get it to focus on the 11 instead. That it might do anyway. Again, it's just even at 1, you just have to tweak these things and see if it suggests something else. I think the risk position one is actually probably quite underused because someone was saying earlier in the chat about how come when you run the solve, the team will look different from 8 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock. Well, the answer is it's minor, tiny fluctuations, and all these players are extremely close in EV. And when you use this risk position stuff, you can actually say to the solver, okay, forget that tiny little difference. What I actually want is a team that nobody owns, because that's my best chance of catching up in, say, a 1 game week in your mini league. So you can actually put it into negative values as a result.
Yeah.
And then go for it.
If you were like free hitting in game week 35 and you're just absolutely miles off where you want to be, you could just run a solve for a free hit and have the risk position really, really low, and it will, you might lose a couple of EV, but it'll be a really, really low ownership team as well.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you want to protect yourself and play extremely and play the EO game, you just raise that up. You raise it up a little bit, and it will sort of tell you to pick the players everyone else has got, as long as they're still within a reasonable close EV.
Yeah. I've never actually used that risk position one. The others I've adapted all of them at various times, but that's the only one where I've not. And the other ones we've not explained, like the maximum team or goalkeeper plus defender value as well, is fairly self-explanatory.
That's for people who don't want Edison, essentially. They can change that max goalkeeper value down.
You can also just exclude and click on Edison. Faster way to do that. Great. We'll just move on to. Should we just go over to some fast, more like quick questions to finish?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a few here already written down. This one from FPL Marmalade is review clever enough to consider the expected price changes when it comes to planning, which you've already covered. You can account for that by manually pretending you have more in the bank or less in the bank than you actually do to account for that. But it doesn't currently do that in terms of it. It's not got any kind of price change predictor built into it. at the moment. So that's one of the few things you really need to consider yourself, and one of the reasons again why you'll look at different analytical players' teams and they'll be really different still. Which this one's from. That second one we've already answered actually, haven't we? From Eric. Yeah, you mentioned that already. Are there any merits of a goalkeeper transfer? That's from FPL Spartans. I would just say no at the moment. I think most people have more things. I literally wrote on the notes, just no. I think at the moment, I think there'll be very, very few people in the position where they need to make or kind of are in the privileged position to be able to make a goalkeeper transfer, I guess. Because you've got to have goalkeeper points are so unpredictable anyway. Like you've got to be in a really, really good position to be able to make a goalkeeper transfer, I think. Do you think?
Yeah. I mean, they're hard to I mean, they are in there, but it does seem quite random in goalkeepers sometimes. It's probably one of the harder positions to model because it's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? In terms of you can get more points for the team being bad sometimes, which is therefore quite hard to model. And there's no necessarily a carry between games to say, oh, he's going to face loads of shots this week and then he's not this week. Like I know some teams have got a proven history of doing it over and over, and their tactic might be to force long shots from distance or whatever. And that kind of seems to continue quite a lot of the time. But there are other teams where it can go from they make 15 saves and then they make zero. I mean, Pickford's a good example. You'd have expected him to make a lot more saves in a bad team than he has so far. So yeah, it's a difficult one. But in general, is there merits of a goalkeeper transfer? I would say, yeah, of course there are. If the EV is big enough for you to make the move, then you do it. I don't think it necessarily changed too much from any other player. And we all know those goalkeepers, you might say like it's a low impact position, but we've seen so many times before it isn't necessarily like you get one pen save and a clean sheet and bonus, you hit in a massive haul. The rate pens are getting missed these days, like unbelievable how no one can take a penalty anymore. It just seems crazy. I mean, I suppose I'd love to see like the do some research into it. I assume there are no more missed now than there were back in the day, so to speak. But it just feels like it. Can't remember Shearer missing many, whereas these guys, you've got like
I don't know,
Haaland dragging it wide and stuff. It's like Christ alive, man.
Well, as a keeper versus an outfielder, ultimately, is whether which has improved better within that time. I don't know. Like I would guess because it's I would assume that more are scored now, but because ultimately it's the outfielder that's in the position of power in terms of a great penalty is never being saved.
Well, it's 0.76, isn't it? Or at least it was the last time I looked. So you're going to score more than you miss on average. And that goes for even people who are bad at them. Like I always see this funny thing of like Watkins not on penalties now, that he's now a better option. Like it's not true, is it? It's not true. Even if he is bad and he's missed quite a lot of them, he's still going to score more than he misses in general if he's above like the average footballer, which Watkins definitely is.
Yeah, he was on he's because I remember seeing that on Twitter, like when he missed that penalty or when he didn't take the penalty, loads of people saying, "Oh, it's better he's not on them." A lot of people saying it jokingly, some people saying it seriously. And then I was about to reply to someone, and then I quickly checked his record, and I was going to be like, "Oh, actually, unless he was missing over 50%, he would be absolutely fine." Then I checked, and he actually had missed over 50%. But yeah, if you let Watkins take 100 penalties, he's definitely not only scoring 50 of them. It's just like small sample partly. The second to last question about Mbeumo we've already answered, and then the last question about should we factor Trippier into decision making, and yeah, my answer to that would be yes. Have you seen the Champions League group? Is ridiculous, by the way. AC Milan.
I saw it just before I come on. Yeah, AC Milan. Who else was in there? Remind me. Was it PSG? Yeah, PSG.
And I can't remember the other team off the top of my head, but another biggie.
Someone will say in the chat.
Another biggie. Yeah, Juventus maybe. Anyway, but I mean, yeah, there's talk of him being. I think it will impact his minutes, as in there's definitely a chance they'll. There you go, Dortmund. There's definitely a chance he'll come off earlier, maybe before or after those games. But I don't think he's suddenly going to be rotated. And one of the reasons I think that is because Eddie Howe, we saw it last season, just how much he loves a consistent team, and maybe that's partly to do with what the players he had available, and he has got the players now to rotate a bit more if he wants. But he just so consistently played the same players. Belly even rested Dan Burn, for example, even though he had Target available a lot of the season. So I would just be confident that he keeps playing Trippier, to be honest. And probably affects his minutes a bit. Affects his minutes a bit, but I don't think he'll suddenly be rotated. Like the Premier League's such a big priority for them. And Livermento's good. He's good, isn't he? And they spent a lot of money on him, but isn't he? Wasn't Livermento also injured for a lot of last season as well?
Yeah, he was. I just think that if you look at the very best teams in the league and where they want to go, or you look at the best team, which is the blueprint, and most teams want to copy that, is ultimately, would they like to have world-class players all over the place? The options change them all. The options tactics like set up, yes, they would. So I think that's where they're all trying to aim to get to. And as coaches, they want to be able to do that stuff as well. That's pretty much what they're paid for, right? Try and win this match, give the players on the pitch the best chance to actually win that game through your tactical insight. And I don't think any coach wants to set up exactly in the same way every single match all the time, and expect in this modern era that it's going to work every single time. Like, they are going to want to change and tweak things. So I'm not as confident. I think as teams get better, as they get more players in, as they have more games, they have to go down those routes eventually. I know that it's fair to say, like, until we've got evidence of it happening, I don't want to go down that route, and it's overthinking. But I think already you could see in the Arsenal case, people were a little bit guilty of that, and then straight away we can see that it's happening already. Still, I would say they're a long way off being able to change the whole 11 and compete. That's the difference there. Like,
yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's mainly a few minor places, but it wouldn't be enough to put me off Trippier, put it that way. I still happily buy him at this moment in stage, but I would not be surprised. Like, why else would you sign players in these positions that if they're not going to get any minutes at all in certain games? It may just be League Cup and stuff, but depending on how far they go, let's say Newcastle get to like the semi-final of the Champions League or something, then yeah, could Trippier get dropped the game before it? Absolutely. Why couldn't he get dropped? I know we're not there yet, but I think it could happen. I think it could happen. He could miss the odd game here or there, maybe. I don't think there's any way that Trippier doesn't start the Champions League games.
Yeah.
But he is a player he has a history. I mean, he played for Atletico Madrid doing this sort of thing, and he's a top professional and stuff, but he is getting on.
So 32, not that old.
That's pretty old. For a footballer these days.
I'm less convinced. But either way, like, we both think not nearly enough to
not have him, but I just think that if he misses out in a game, you're kind of like, okay, well, at least we know that now.
I would definitely go with him over Diaz now, even this game week, even though Diaz has got Fulham personally, just because Trippier's attacking threat and the fact that Diaz can still be benched, it can still happen.
Do you think that he's worth 2 million more than the likes? Like, say Botman's fit. I still think that's a consideration. I mean, that is a hell of a lot of money. Like, I get the argument that maybe at the moment you don't really need that money because you've basically got Haaland and probably no other premium. And I understand that, but that can change very quickly. And we've just discussed that having money in your team in other places does actually have a value on it for expected points. So, that is, you're essentially paying for any attacking threat and any bonus that you might get over Botman, which, yes, it's probably quite substantial, but is it 2 million substantial?
I think it is. Well, I think the reality is you probably end up with two. I think Trippier and Shah or Trippier and Botman is where most people will be. But yeah, I think because of, like, we'll get them in for those good fixtures as well, which is a really good fixture run, and the fact that we just, like, Newcastle is seriously good. I was looking at Chase shared one of those rolling 12 game week XG, etc. things. And they're above Man City over the last 12 game weeks in terms of just their XG versus XG difference, basically. Over the last 12 game weeks, they're ahead of Man City. Like, they're ridiculously good. And yeah, basically my point, they can beat teams 5 or 6-0, for example, against those teams at the bottom of the league. And with the amount of crosses he puts into the box in those types of games, that's where he's likely to suddenly get those huge hauls where he gets, even if he doesn't get an attacking return, it's the three bonus as well, isn't it? So I just think, I think he's well worth the money given the alternatives during that period where they have good fixtures. Yeah.
But if I say to you, this isn't a perfect example, let's just put you on the spot. Trent Alexander-Arnold, and then I say Konate, and let's say they're both nailed. Look at the difference in price there and what you'd have achieved so far. Like, you might get the odd extra assist or goal, but unless you're getting a lot of assists and goals, like, to pay that much for him over Konate at the beginning of the season would have been pointless. Is that just who cares? It's 3 games, like.
Yeah, but that's not true. That we all go for Trent over Konate every day of the week, don't we?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, that money hasn't been proven to be worthwhile, has it? Sure. I know in just those 3 game weeks.
From 3 games.
But even over large periods, like, say you could say last season, maybe the back end of 10, 15 games, Trent got enough attacking returns to maybe justify that over the other Liverpool options. But it's not often that fullbacks go on those attacking runs where they get that many attacking runs, even in the case of someone as good as Trent.
Yeah, but it's just quite easy to, well, not easy to by any means, but we can predict when those runs are likely to come based on the fixtures, can't we? That's the thing. If you look at it over a whole season, maybe not. But yeah, it's in those types of games, I think, and you target them for those I think that's a reality of where Trent a couple of seasons ago was the kind of asset where you had him for the whole season. And it was a no-brainer. This season, it probably feels like he's going to be the type of asset where you, because of the lack of clean sheets that will probably continue this year, you're just getting him in for those periods where they've got easy fixtures. And it's probably the same with Trippier with how they've increased his price as well. But I think he's well worth it.
Okay, I think Shah's underlooked as well. He had great XGI last season. 5 million. When you look at say Shah compared to Botman, I think the 0.5, like if you've got that to spare, that looks like it's probably a worthwhile investment. So yeah, I think if you really want to go for it, then you get for Shah and Trippier over this run, and just hope that they can get something between them. But some people are doing it. You're doing it this week, aren't you, potentially? But I think maybe I'll have to wait for a game week or two before I get them in.
Yeah, I'll be buying Trippier this week. Well, if everything goes to plan, I'll buy Trippier this week and then Shah or Botman next week. Yeah, and I'll be on double for that whole run, I think. That's the plan anyway. Because I'm just very happy to sell a Stupinan. And also, it's partly also because my replacement for Chilwell was Gusto. And I'm expecting after the international break, Gusto's not going to be playing regularly again. So I'm probably in more need of just another defender in general than most other teams are. Because other people would have replaced with Udogie, for example, or another defender who's going to keep playing. So it's probably partly that team dependent thing as well, where I'm just in general more in need to get another defender in who plays. So I think double Newcastle defence makes sense for me. And in terms of doing it this week, it's because I don't like Newcastle playing Brighton. I'd much rather have Trippier than a Stupinan for that fixture, basically.
Yeah, I think it's important. Well, not important, but probably worth considering not tripling up on defence just to leave yourself the option of either Isak or Wilson if one of them gets injured.
Yeah,
I think Tom's saying there Newcastle attack were top for XG on Chase's chart. This is rolling, obviously. It's not just from these 3 game week small sample. It's going to include last season as well. And I think that's a valid point because I think Isak or Wilson, if either one of them's out, they're on penalties as well, and it is a very good attack with very good fixtures. So I think I've seen a lot of people saying they're considering tripling up in defence. Could work fine, but Wilson's injury record isn't the best in the world ever. So I think that there could be an avenue there potentially, that opens up to us at some point.
Yeah, that's one thing I was considering was whether I do what eventually do. Like I was thinking, this week. This is when I was thinking about it a couple of weeks ago. It was like, well, is this week where I go like Watkins to Isak, for example? But I just am very happy to hold Watkins now. And again, if you've got Jackson, you're going to hold him realistically, aren't you? So I just don't know where there'll be that room for Isak because I just can't see people moving to 3 up front at all with the amount of options in midfield. So, and it's just the fact he so consistently gets subbed early as well for Wilson, Isak.
I'm not interested.
Thomas is right.
Strictly if one gets injured.
Thomas in the chat saying Botman should be 5-2. Yeah, he absolutely should be.
He should be, but then if they were both 5, you'd go for Shah, wouldn't you? Just simply because his goal threats.
Yeah,
more.
True. 5, and you can't make Shah at 5.5 compared to other. Botman at 4.5 is probably fine actually compared to other defenders. That's the thing. It's just because he was one of the prices we saw really early on, so initially it seemed absolutely insane, and then actually saw the other prices and it didn't seem as ridiculous.
Yeah, it's still pretty ridiculous, but it's less ridiculous. All of them are pretty ridiculous, aren't they?
Well, I thought Ben White being more expensive than Gabriel was ridiculous, but it turns out not. Great. Is there any other questions in the chat that anyone wants to ask?
Yeah, feel free to put them in there. I can answer one that I didn't answer before on Man City about subs. The thing with Pep is he won't make subs. It's going to completely depend on the game state. So if he's happy with the team, the way they're performing, as in their control in the game, now that might only be that they're winning 1-0. But if he's happy with the players that are out there are performing what he's asking and they're doing it the way he's doing, then he won't make those subs. The times he'll make subs are, like you saw when Sheffield United scored, right, we've got a few minutes to change something, I need to change something, he'll do them then. And he might do them if they're winning 4 or 5-0. As we've seen, they'll bring players off if the game's won. Like Haaland will come off, people will get rotated and bring off if they're really smashing the game. But when you've got that middle stage of and he's happy, he won't make the subs. And that just seems to be a running theme. I get where he's coming from as well, because if he's put those players out to do the job that he wants and they're doing a good job as far as he's concerned, why would he try and mix that up and change the tempo and potentially lose it? He's done it so many times where he talks about this pauser and the tempo, and he might bring a Foden on, for example, he can't help it. The guys just all go. He's literally got one setting. And as a result, they could have getting more turnovers. It's frustrating as a watcher because you think, well, they could just blow away in this team by 3 or 4 goals. But, he's he's obviously the main man. He knows what he's doing and he knows how to get the results. So you've got to kind of trust it.
Yep.
Lewis Hall then is saying,
he plays left back for Newcastle, doesn't he? Yeah, he's not.
Yeah,
I guess he was. I guess probably in relation to rotation, maybe.
No, I think with him, because Dan Burn's playing left back, right? And they've obviously signed Lewis Hall, who's a very different player, very, very offensive. I think he's a really good player. Yeah, so if he comes in as a more traditional left back and is more attacking at 4.5 million, I think he's a great pick. The problem is we just don't know he's going to play. And at the moment, it doesn't look. When I was looking why he wasn't in the squad the other day, it was essentially because his fitness was too low. So whether he'll be back in time for the fixtures is one thing, and then the other thing is, well, will he actually replace Dan Burn? As Sam said, Eddie Howe's not really been one to rotate and chop and change the positions. But rest assured, if he's in the team, that'll be the guy people go to, especially if Dan Burn was to say get injured or something like that. I know Taggart's there as well, but I just think Lewis Hall's a step above. That may have a knock-on effect. So Trippier, Trippier might be less attacking as a result and tuck in. He'll basically do the equivalent of the Dan Burn on that side. We've seen Trippier playing back threes before as the third centre-back. So,
yeah. Another question, kind of more specific. In fact, two actually. So, would you sell Martinelli for Mbeumo or Maddison, or would you just save the transfer for international break? I think
I'd sell Martinelli.
Would you? Yeah. Yeah, I guess with those potential players, they're going to be players you want long term ahead of Martinelli anyway, aren't they? So if you've got, it depends who else you've got on your team. I'd imagine this is a team. If you've got Mitoma as well, you probably sell Mitoma ahead of Martinelli, for example. But yeah, I think if Martinelli is your worst midfielder, then yeah, that probably does make sense actually in terms of long term.
I mean, it's fine. It's fine to keep. They've got Everton the week afterwards, but yeah, I just think Maddison's probably and Mbeumo have probably got higher expected minutes, and I just think they're probably better options, or certainly a better fixture anyway.
Yeah. The other one says reviews showing Haaland to Watkins and Saka to Salah in game week 9. Can you see the analytics community going with no Haaland at any point, even if reviews say
yeah, I can see them doing it. A lot. They're sickos. Some of them are mental, mate. Trust me. In the Discord. Yeah, people will do it. There will be people 100%. Who do it. I don't have a doubt.
Yeah.
What if it says 100%? That's the best way to do it. You do it.
Yeah, I'd definitely sell Haaland. Yeah, in that case, it's a thrill.
You live by the seat of... That's crazy, isn't it? Because people see me as more of the risk taker, but I probably wouldn't do that. Whereas you'd be happy to.
I think that's kind of partly. You've definitely got there's like a Man City Haaland thing though with you. It was the same when he joined the league. You were far better at kind of captaining him early on, and I was too slow to captain him. Don't know. You can just. It's the fact he can always surprise you, can't he?
Yeah. There'll be a lot of people that will be on the edge and say it's close enough where they want to play the effective ownership game, and they'll say no, I'm not exposing myself to that, and I'll keep him as a result.
Yeah, I just think if there's a week where, for example, I've not got the fixtures to hand here, but say there's a week where Haaland's playing, I don't know, Arsenal or whatever, and Salah's got Luton or whoever it might be, a really easy fixture. It's way more exciting to have Salah, and it's clearly far better, no matter how good Haaland is. And it's a really, really bad run, isn't it, during that period? So I would definitely willingly sell Haaland. But it's just not going to it's really good that Salah, and it'd be really good, would be ideal if Salah could just not go to Saudi Arabia. That'd be great for FPL if he could just stay, because otherwise we're not even faced with those kind of decisions.
Yeah, I just bought Salah into my team in Sky, and I'm already in the top 500 in the world in that game, and I could really do with him staying in the team as a result. So yeah, I want to keep him.
It does seem like, if you look at the odds for him leaving, there's a chance it will happen, but it's pretty minimal. It just seems very likely it'll happen next summer, doesn't it? To be honest.
Probably, but we'll worry about that later, I guess. All good things have to come to an end eventually.
I guess review isn't allowing for a wildcard 9, so I can't find a way to get Salah and Haaland. Oh, I see.
What do you mean it's not allowing for it?
I reckon he's probably saying it prefers other game weeks maybe, or the upside of doing it isn't worth it for his team particularly. I think there will be lots of people who wildcard in 9 actually, and potentially the actual fixture swing is more an 8, I think, and so I wonder if more people go there. It's I've not actually run it through review yet though. I just like that fixture swing in 8 actually.
Well, I initially thought that. I think it's just game week 8 is really bad, but actually the swing comes in 9 in general. I think 9 is actually a better week. It's just 8 is kind of a week you almost have to suck it up, because it's basically as Arsenal play Man City. It depends how many players you've got from that fixture.
Yep, true. Yeah,
that's the thing that's overriding it.
And then doing it, people like to do an international break. I think that's probably a bit overblown, but yeah. That's something we can discuss in a couple of weeks, actually, is how you actually work out when to wildcard. Like, what's the difference in EV got to be over X amount of game weeks based on when you do an optimal wildcard compared to your team for you to commit to doing it.
Well, that's where, and people will have been in it last season, you just have to get in. Well, me personally, you go into review and you try all the different options, don't you? You say, I wildcard here, I don't wildcard here, I do it in this game week instead, I don't do it in this game week. Which one comes out more EV positive, and you just go with that one. Well, you don't just go with that one. If you want to follow the robot exactly, you just go with that one.
Yeah. One other question: would you yeet Odegaard out for Maddison if you're planning on taking him out next week anyway to do stupid with Trippier? Yeah, probably would in that case if you're planning on doing it next week anyway. Yeah, it's done.
I would.
Even if it backfires this week, it won't be one you'll be wanting to reverse next game week.
Yeah.
Right. Should we leave it there, Luke?
Let's leave it there.
Great. Thanks to everyone who listened. I think we've got about 59. We've had between 50 and 60 people watching the whole stream, so really appreciate it. Give us a follow on Twitter. Give the video a like. I think that does something apparently. Don't know. People ask for it though. Like the video.
We might get Stormzy to watch it.
Yes.
Can you imagine Stormzy watching this?
Yeah, I can. I can absolutely imagine Stormzy watching it.
I don't know what I meant by that.
He's definitely he's team analytics, 100%.
I'd love that, to be honest. It'd be so good.
We need like a rival musician to be team analytics. Yeah.
A rival. Who would be the music? Yeah, representation of analytics.
Like Radiohead, maybe. Do you think the striker is a bit like?
That's who people say I'm the lead singer of. Is it Tom York? Is Radiohead, right? Or have I made that up?
Yeah, Tom York.
Yeah, that's who everyone says I look like.
Yeah, you do look a bit like him.
I'm already here.
Yeah. Don't know why Radiohead immediately came to mind for team analytics. It just did. Elbow? I don't know. I don't know.
Bono.
Bono. You too. Yeah. Because we're always trying to find the edge.
Actually, yellow goes quite well. Not yellow. What the fuck? Coldplay. I'd literally call them their song. Goes quite well. Because we're just like depressing.
Yeah. Fix you. Yeah. Great. So yeah, join us next week where Chris Martin will be on the pod.
We've run out of time clock. There's some sort of pun there as well. Anyway, catch you later, guys.
Cheers, guys. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye.